You're somewhere in the North Sea, roughly 1,000 years ago. The coast disappeared hours ago. The water is gray, the wind is freezing, and you're sitting on a wooden ship with about 60 other men. There is no cabin, no bedroom, no shower, no private corner. You eat here, you sleep here, you get sick here, and eventually, whether you're a Viking warrior, a merchant, or the man steering the ship, your body is going to ask you for something that absolutely cannot wait until England. You need to poop. So you look around. 30 meters of wooden ship. A mast, a sail, oars, shields, ropes, barrels, 60 men sitting almost shoulder to shoulder, and not a toilet anywhere. No bathroom door, no little room at the back, no plumbing, no flush. Not even enough ship to hide behind. So what exactly did Vikings do when nature called in the middle of the sea? The uncomfortable answer is probably much simpler than you're hoping. A bucket. But the bucket is only the beginning of the problem, because to understand just how bad going to the bathroom on a Viking ship could be, you first have to understand what a Viking ship actually was. Forget the movie version, with enormous decks, cabins below, and enough room for warriors to walk around looking dramatic. A longship was built for speed. It was long, narrow, shallow, light enough to row, and absolutely ruthless about wasting space. One of the best examples we have is Skuldelev II, a Viking warship built near Dublin around the year 1042. Reconstructed, it measures roughly 30 meters long, but only about 3.8 meters wide, with 60 oars and a crew estimated at around 65 to 70 men. That means dozens of human beings, their clothing, food, water, equipment, and weapons all had to fit into something narrower than many modern living rooms. Now, put yourself on that deck. Your personal space is basically wherever your body happens to fit.
When Denmark's Viking ship museum built the full-size reconstruction Sea Stallion from Glendalough and sailed it on long experimental voyages, crew members had less than 1 square meter of space each. There was no private living area. Eating, sleeping, washing, working, getting sick, and going to the toilet all had to happen on the same open ship. And the museum describes the toilet situation in one brutally simple sentence: the only toilet is a bucket. Now, that doesn't mean archaeologists dug up a 1,000-year-old Viking poop bucket with someone's name carved into it. Wooden containers decay, human waste disappears, and Viking shipwrecks are very bad at preserving instructions titled "How to Use the Bathroom," so we have to be careful. We don't have evidence proving that every Viking crew used one identical toilet system. What we have is ship archaeology, knowledge of life aboard, later written evidence about Norse life, and perhaps most importantly, experimental archaeology. People actually rebuilding these ships, putting dozens of humans on them, taking them back onto the North Atlantic, and discovering very quickly which problems have to be solved. And apparently one of those problems is finding somewhere to put the bucket. On the modern Sea Stallion reconstruction, one toilet can be placed beneath removable deck planks toward the bow. Another setup used while the ship is anchored is even more glamorous. Stretch a small piece of canvas near the side of the ship, place a bucket with a seat behind it, and congratulations, you have invented the Viking bathroom. Sort of. There is technically a privacy screen, there is technically a seat, and there are still dozens of your crewmates sitting only a few meters away. The museum itself jokes that the toilet comes with a beautiful view of the sea, the sky, and all the crew members who are never very far away. This is the part modern movies conveniently leave out.
Imagine waking up on a freezing morning. Your clothes are damp, the ship is rolling, you've slept badly, someone beside you has been snoring, someone else is seasick. You've eaten dried fish, bread, and porridge for days, and now you have to carry the community toilet across a moving wooden deck. Because using the bucket is only stage 1. Stage 2 is getting rid of what's inside it. The ocean makes that part fairly obvious. Waste could be emptied overboard when conditions allowed. Urine presents an even simpler problem. But notice the phrase, "when conditions allowed," because you're not standing beside a swimming pool. You're standing on a narrow wooden ship that can be pitching, rolling, and taking waves over the side. The deck is wet, the ropes are moving, the sail needs attention. Other men are rowing or working around you. Now try balancing yourself while using a bucket. Suddenly, indoor plumbing starts looking like one of humanity's greatest achievements. Could a Viking simply go directly over the side?
Probably in calm conditions, and there is no reason to imagine a sailor would carry a bucket around if an easier and safe option were available. But doing it over the side of a ship in rough weather creates an extremely obvious new problem. You don't want the last thing anyone says about you to be, "He survived 3 raids and then fell into the North Sea while taking a dump." A bucket lets you stay lower, closer to the center of the ship, and gives you something that can be moved and emptied afterward. It's not elegant, but elegance was not really the design requirement. Not falling overboard was. And now add 60 people. This is where the bathroom problem becomes a logistics problem. A Viking longship wasn't carrying 60 passengers who could disappear into separate cabins. Everyone was living almost on top of everyone else. If one person needs the bucket, everyone nearby knows exactly what's happening. There is no extractor fan. There is no locked door. There isn't even really another room.
Privacy, in the modern sense, simply wasn't part of the ship, and the smell would have joined everything else already happening on deck. Wet wool, sweat, tar, seawater, smoke when cooking was possible, fish, damp wood, unwashed bodies, and seasickness. The Viking ocean experience probably smelt significantly less like adventure than the posters suggest. Fresh water made the situation even more interesting. Vikings had to carry drinking water aboard in barrels or other containers, along with food that could survive a voyage: flour, porridge ingredients, bread, butter, and dried fish. Water occupied valuable space and weight, which means you didn't casually waste large quantities of it creating your own private shower every morning. And once again, experimental voyages show just how quickly this becomes real. On one modern Sea Stallion voyage, the museum reported average water consumption around 3 liters per crew member per day, with supplies refilled when the ship reached land. That's with modern planning and equipment, so imagine the Viking version. You wake up cold and wet. You drink, you eat, you row, you sweat, you get sprayed with salt water, maybe you vomit, maybe someone beside you uses the bucket, and then you sleep in basically the same place for days. This also explains something important about Viking voyages that we tend to forget. The Vikings weren't always trying to spend as much time at sea as possible. A ship was transportation, not a floating apartment. Whenever geography, weather, and the purpose of the voyage allowed it, getting ashore solved a huge number of problems instantly. You could find fresh water, cook more easily, repair equipment, stretch, sleep without 60 knees around your head. And yes, you could go to the bathroom on land. Viking sailors were highly dependent on weather and wind. Experimental research and historical sources suggest ships could wait for favorable winds for long periods, rather than blindly forcing their way into terrible conditions. The romantic image is a Viking ship permanently charging through giant waves. The reality included a lot more waiting. But that doesn't save you when you're crossing open water.
Once you're out there, the bucket comes back, and there is another question. What did they wipe with? This is where the historical record gets wonderfully unhelpful. We simply don't know exactly what a Viking sailor used every time he went to the bathroom at sea. Organic materials disappear. Nobody thought to document the procedure in enough detail for people 1,000 years later making YouTube videos. They may have used whatever practical material was available depending on the voyage and circumstances. Cloth, water, and other disposable natural materials were all possibilities in the wider medieval world, but on a crowded ship, you're limited by one extremely important rule. Everything you bring takes up space, and space was already disappearing fast. Remember Skuldelev 2, around 30 meters long, but potentially around 65 to 70 people aboard. That's the part you should keep picturing. Not one Viking using a bucket, 60 Vikings sharing the same environment around that bucket. The remarkable thing is that these ships still worked. They crossed seas, they connected Scandinavia with Britain, Ireland, continental Europe, and eventually the North Atlantic world. Ships like these moved warriors, merchants, settlers, animals, supplies, silver, and information across enormous distances, and they did it without a proper bathroom. That's what makes the Viking ship such a strange piece of technology. From the outside, it's magnificent. A huge sail catches the wind. The hull bends with the waves. Dozens of oars can move the ship when the wind disappears. The design is light, fast, and sophisticated enough to cross open ocean. Then you climb aboard and discover 60 exhausted people sleeping on deck next to a bucket. The technology is advanced. The lifestyle absolutely is not. And the bathroom problem reveals something bigger about Viking life. We usually judge old technology by the impressive things it could do. How fast was the ship? How far could it sail? How many warriors could it carry? But the people who actually used that technology still had ordinary human bodies. They needed water, they needed food, they needed sleep. They got cold, they got sick, and every single one of them eventually needed somewhere to poop. A Viking chieftain could own a ship. A warrior could carry an expensive sword. The crew could be sailing toward one of the richest cities in Europe. But when your stomach decided it was time, social status couldn't install plumbing. You were still on a wooden deck, in the wind, looking at a bucket. And maybe that's the funniest part, because 1,000 years later, Viking ships are displayed inside museums. We stare at them like masterpieces. We photograph their beautiful curved hulls. We admire the craftsmanship, the navigation, the courage required to take one across the North Atlantic. Then someone asks the question almost every visitor eventually asks, "Where's the toilet?" And suddenly the entire Viking age becomes human again. Tonight, at some point, you'll walk into a private room. You'll close a door. You'll sit on a perfectly dry toilet that doesn't move beneath you. Clean water will appear at the push of a button. The waste will disappear through pipes you never have to see. You'll probably spend longer looking at your phone than thinking about any of it. A Viking sailor would think you're living like a king, not because of your car, not because of electricity, not because of the internet, because you can poop indoors without 60 armed men watching you, and your toilet doesn't have a handle for carrying it back across the deck.